going to wait for the, hey Leah. Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today and for taking this time out of your day to address a really important topic that we are super passionate about. For any of you who don't know me, hello Peter, good to have you here. For any of you who don't know me, I'm Nicola McAdam. I'm a life coach and also the founder of MindVibes, a well-being company. I was inspired to launch MindVibes after going on my very personal mental health journey of severe depression and burnout. And I was really inspired to bring tried and tested coping mechanisms and stress management tools that are also scientifically proven to individuals and corporates alike. Everything that we do at MindVibes is grounded in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. We work with scientifically proven frameworks. We work with a lot of business people who are pragmatists. So there's science behind what we do. And we also take a holistic approach to our learning. And what I mean by that is that we look at the individual as a whole, because everything from the food you eat, your exercise habits, the thoughts that you think, the behaviors you exhibit, the relationships you find yourself in, both personally and professionally, all have a huge impact on your well-being. So that's what I mean when we say we take a holistic approach to the individuals in our learning. We work at all levels of the organisation. The landscape has really changed for leadership, and there's a brand new skill set that is required in this current climate. So we ensure that our leaders always start by looking inwards at themselves and that they're conscious. We also have online interactive wellbeing programs for teams to build confidence, improve empathy skills, work on communication, increase resilience, and all that really important stuff to ensure the organisation is operating at its best. And we're also seeing a lot of success with our one-on-one wellbeing coaching that we run at all levels of the organisation.
Thank you so much for setting the scene for what MindVibe does, Nicola. Hi everyone, my name is Tor. I am a well-being coach, a sensitive and a healer, and it feels like such a privilege to be here to talk about men's work because it's something I have become increasingly more and more passionate about because, as Nicola will allude to in a moment, the statistics around this are stark, and also more and more men are coming towards me asking for help. So it's a really interesting time to be working in this space. Well-being has been a part of my life since childhood. I had quite a chaotic childhood growing up, but thankfully my grandmother taught me meditation at a really young age, and I think that this in many ways, this opened a door in my mind to a sense of inner strength, which really helped me persevere and show a sense of fortitude through that time. And also going through this difficult time has led me to understand what it means to not necessarily feel well. So I'm really passionate about helping other people, specifically men, to feel well within themselves. And I've done a tremendous amount of research through this, and my passion is to really help people to find that sense of inner calm within themselves, so that they can have an authentic connection to their inner compass.
So men's mental health is so important, and I really feel that it doesn't get the amount of airtime that it deserves. And it's becoming so topical now, we can't not address it. So we're going to look at why we're focusing on men in particular. We're not going to change the world in 45 minutes, but what we are going to do is take a look at the key challenges that men are facing when it comes to mental health, both in their personal lives, but also in this context in the workplace, and how, as colleagues and leaders, we can really support them. As Tor said, the statistics around mental health are stark. Suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 35. 3 out of 4 people who died by suicide are men. 87% of people who sleep on the street are men. And men are also far less likely to access psychological therapies. So it's absolutely critical that we address this. When it comes to the impact on business, I mean, as well as the individual suffering and, ending in fatal consequences, the impact on business is huge. Here's a statistic from the American Psychiatric Association, who stated that employees with unresolved depression experience a 35% reduction in productivity. So that's absolutely huge. This contributes to a loss in the economy of over $200 billion in the US alone. And the rest of the world really does tend to follow the US, rightly or wrongly, in terms of statistics like this. So it's absolutely critical that we address this in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for stating those statistics, and they are a huge driver for why I am so passionate about working with Nicola to set up some circles and set up some structures around how we can support men better at home, but also at work. There's many other inspirations I have as well, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with these people, and you might have some different thoughts about them, but Andrew Tate has been in the media quite a lot lately, and Jordan Peterson has also been in the media quite a lot over the last few years. And there's, especially around Andrew Tate, I've seen so many clips of people on TikTok who go and interview young boys who are like 13, 14 years old, and the interviewer asks them, so what do you think about Andrew Tate? And so many of these boys say, oh, he's great. He's like the representation of men and masculinity. And the stuff that he says about women and the stuff that he says about the world is outrageous. So I think that we have a responsibility in so many ways to represent a different form of masculinity, both at work and also at home, and to show that there is a different way to go about being a man. And we will allude to so many things. All of this will unveil itself as we are moving through. But yeah, I think it's so important that we begin to tell a different narrative, because as we begin to tell a different narrative, also hopefully that would change some of the statistics that Nicola was talking about earlier as well. And obviously, like, as we well know, historically, men has primarily focused on their physical well-being, which is really important, right? Our health is key, but it often neglects our emotional and mental well-being. So we're hoping to extend with the work that we do here at MindVibes to move more into that emotional and mental well-being, because as Nicola was saying, it is this holistic approach to well-being which will really do the trick. And I really want to just open up with this quote by Frank Bruno, who is a former professional boxer. He's also been open about his struggles around mental health. And he says mental health can happen to, or mental illness can happen to anybody. You can be a dustman, a politician, a Tesco worker, anyone. It could be your dad, your brother, or your aunt. And as I was reading this quote, there's also statistics which says 1 in 4 people struggle with mental health. And that is obviously true, but I think also what we all have to remember is that everybody has mental health, and everybody has to look after their mental health. Mental illness does not discriminate. So it's something that we all have to work on. And this includes men too, which is why we think it's so important to focus on this area. So before I continue, I'd love to engage with the people in the room. So we've already asked you for your name. It'd be great to know where you're calling in from, because I'm sure all of you will be calling in from all over the world. And it's always so exciting to see that maybe suddenly we have someone calling in from Australia. That's always really fun. I've had that before. They were like, it was Australia and it was 6 in the morning for them. So that was quite funny. But I'd really love to just open up, if you can say, what does masculinity mean to you? It's just be good to get an understanding on the room. And please just, put that in the chat. So Nicola, what does masculinity mean to you?
I think if you look at the old-fashioned version, I guess what springs to mind is strength and leadership and, yeah, being manly, the provider. It's definitely not how I see masculinity, because, you know, I'm very much an equal and, you know, think that women are strong and bold. But it's just interesting that those words do still spring to mind when people ask what masculinity is. But I think the whole word is being totally redefined. Like, what is masculinity now?
Yeah.
It's not what we used to perceive it as, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone in the room have any thoughts? What comes to mind for you when you think about masculinity?
Yeah.
Masculinity means taking extra effort. That's really interesting, isn't it? Guido from Germany. Masculinity means for me being flexible and adaptable to a high degree. Love that.
Really, really interesting.
Because it's not negative.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And I will be quoting someone on the next slide, but I recently read a book by him, and he did something which was quite clever and interesting, which I necessarily haven't seen anywhere else, is that he actually, in many ways, separates masculinity and femininity from the gender and actually pulls them out as a series of characteristics. And actually, all peoples, regardless of your gender, can be somewhere on the spectrum of being feminine and masculine. So you can have women who's more have more masculine quote unquote traits, and you can have men who has more feminine traits or like femininity traits. So it's like a spectrum of that. So like, let's say a masculine trait is to be the protector, but that could be a man or a woman, like regardless. Or let's say like a more feminine trait is to perhaps be nurturing, right? And a man and a woman can both be nurturing. So it's a really interesting, and you know, it's like over the last few decades, there's been like a crisis of masculinity, which is also the scene of today, is that there is a crisis of masculinity and figuring out what masculinity is. And it's like, it's really about coming up with a new story of what it means to be a man and have a sense of masculinity. Love that, Joey. Being caring. That's really nice.
And Peter said masculinity means not getting confused with toxic masculinity. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, toxic masculinity is an interesting one, because on sort of like a cultural scale, quote unquote toxic masculinity trait has also been reinforced and rewarded, which is also then is no wonder why some men fall into that trap, basically. So it's then, how can we make sure that as a community we reward the quote unquote right kind of behaviors, which is so it's a huge undertaking that we are taking upon us, but it really does start with the work that we are going to be talking about today. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. I'm going to move on to a quote by John Wineland. And this is really where my sense of masculinity also comes from. So he says, masculinity is the result of being rested in a state of feathered, embodied consciousness, and then transmitting that sacred and timeless connection into our environments as a gift to others. Masculine leadership should then be defined as the actions and the decisions we make from that place, which will serve the greatest love, art, openness, growth, and peace. And what I really love about this quote is that actually, in so many ways, it doesn't necessarily place certain characteristics onto men, or masculinity in a sense. But I suppose it does talk to like love, art, openness, growth, and peace. But I think the one thing which really always stands out to me here, which is this of being like a rested state of steadiness to yourself, which is really about becoming grounded in yourself, which is what Nicola was alluding to earlier with all of our leadership training really begins with looking inwards. And the only way to become grounded in yourself is by starting that journey of looking inwards. I also want to draw out this image from this amazing Instagram account, which is called The Tin Man. And this is part of a larger story, but and it comes from the researcher who came up with the trait alpha males. And as you can see on that pictures, it does say alpha males are impressive and display strength and good health, but they're also good with children and are extraordinarily generous. So this talks about alpha males in a pack of chimpanzees. And yes, as it does say, you know, typically men are in good strength and good health, but they're also incredibly good with children and are extraordinarily generous. So it's interesting how his research originally said that, and then sort of through time that's been misconstrued, like the alpha male quote has been misconstrued into something completely different. So again, it really comes back to changing some of these narratives around what masculinity means. I'm also now going to show you a video.
Masculinity. There appears to be many forms of it, but does this one word comprehensively define what it means to be a man? Let's take a look at its definition. Having qualities traditionally ascribed to men as strength and boldness. Masculinity itself is not toxic. However, a man becomes toxic when he allows his humanity to only be defined by masculinity. Let's use the pit bull terrier as an example. For decades, this dog was bred to be an aggressive protector and fighter. This eventually caused this beautiful breed to become unstable and volatile. If not for the relentless efforts of dog rescue initiatives, the masses would have never known that the pit bull terrier is also a loving, compassionate companion and family dog. Please don't misconstrue what I'm saying, because I am very masculine. However, I am no longer confined by its limited definition. I am a comprehensive man of the Most High, courageous, but also compassionate, strong, but sensitive. My brothers, we are human, so let's embrace our humanity and no longer allow our lives to be limited.
And again, like, I think it's such an important thing that that video alludes to. It's the expansiveness of what masculinity means, right? It's not this narrow, quote unquote, toxic masculinity. And also that's not really a good place to, it's not really a good place to start from. So we need to begin changing that narrative. And we do that with the awareness and listening to other men telling a different story about it. Anything you want to share your thoughts so far, Nicola, about what you've seen?
I just really love that that quote right at the end. It's about not being defined by masculinity. Yeah. And I think this causes a lot of the challenges that we're going to come on to in terms of how men express themselves or don't express themselves. Just this pressure from society and this impression that it's, you know, sometimes good to be defined by your masculinity in order to be a man, which is most certainly not true.
Yeah. No, precisely. So I've put together these guiding principles for men. These are also meant to be guided principles for women to help men move towards these sort of aspirational principles. You know, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the podcast host were saying something such as, you know, women have centuries of practice. Sometimes my English gets the better of me. Centuries of training of how to be open, how to be intuitive, how to create space, how to share. So it's really, in a sense, I suppose, also women helping men to get there, because now men have only been doing this maybe for the past few decades, and it's sort of been baby steps. So I think there's definitely something about women. I mean, a lot of responsibility is already on women's shoulders. But yeah, I think women definitely have a lot of experience that us men can learn from and draw upon to get towards what I'm going to be talking about next. And really, as the first word says here, it really starts with self-awareness, right? Men has to take that responsibility of creating some self-awareness with themselves about what they're struggling with and also how they're going to move forward. It's like I was having a client session this morning with a man, and one of the things that he said to me was, Tor, I just feel angry all the time. Like every response I have is just anger. And I need some help to understand that anger, where it sits from, and also how to process it in a healthier way, because it had really, in a bad way, impacted his relationship with his partner. So the kind of work that I would be doing with him is to, in many ways, improve his emotional literacy, because it's not really, I mean, it is obviously anger, but there's something underlying that anger, and it's helping him create some language around that, and also release some of those tensions that are sitting within his body. And you know what this client is doing so beautifully is that, you know, he is beginning to take responsibility and accountability for his well-being. And again, this is twofold with men and women. So men obviously have to really start to appreciate that the ways in which they respond to the world around them isn't actually conducive to creating a healthy state and a healthy state of well-being. Because, you know, as Nicola was alluding to earlier, there's a lot of like conscious leadership, and a man who is a conscious leader is a man who takes responsibility and accountability for his well-being, because then he can be a leader who is guiding his people in the right direction. This was also a really interesting article that I read recently, which actually said this: men doesn't need to talk more, they need to be listened to, because they're already communicating. I mean, in a moment I'll say men clearly need to talk more, but I think it's really important for women and for other men in a group with other men to appreciate that anger is communication, right? When they are showing anger, it is a symbol, it is a signal that something is wrong. And then it's about how can we create these safe space for active listening to occur and to happen. I was working with one of our clients recently where I was running a men's circle. There was about 10 people in the room. This was the first time we did this one in person. It was about 10 people in the room. It was our first session. These people work together in a workplace. I arrived and I thought to myself, oh, I'm sure they really won't share anything heavy. Like, I'm sure like these are men. Like I was bringing lots of biases and lots of preconceived notions. And then we sat down and I opened the space and talked about that this is a safe, non-judgmental space. You can obviously share as much or as little as you like. And as soon as we opened up, one of the men was talking about immediately how he was struggling with depression, how he didn't have the words, how another one was talking about sort of his paternal rights being taken away from him. Another one was talking about how he's going to have to move back home to a different country to support his parents. And it was so beautiful because I hadn't expected anyone to share anything that personal, but it's quite remarkable that when men are in that safe space where they are encouraged to share and they feel comfortable to do that, something quite magical happens and they do open up and they do begin to share. And I was talking to them afterwards. So like, what did you find to be the best benefit of doing this circle? And, you know, by talking is in on itself an emotional release, because if we're not talking, we're suppressing, and a lot of anger is probably rooted in a lot of suppression. So it's like you're closing that lid down. And actually just by like releasing that energy, you know, they feel lighter, they feel more comfortable with themselves. That means that they respond better to their clients and the people that they're with. So it's like the main benefit in there is just that energetic release of actually airing your thoughts and airing your feelings. And it was just, I was flabbergasted when I left that space. It was really, really amazing. So like I said, on the flip side, men still do need to talk. And a part of the work that we do in our men's circles is to improve emotional literacy. So like really move into what is the deeper feeling underneath, like bad, sad, good, angry. So men definitely do need to talk too. This one is to both the men and the women in the room. Like, it's so important to be a role model. And Nicola, what are some thoughts here?
Yeah, I think the more that especially men can be role models,
Yeah.
and not be afraid to show their vulnerability or talk about things that are bothering them, the more, especially as a leader, it gives other people permission to do the same subconsciously.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the ways in which I create that safe space in a men's circle is that I open up with sharing a story about something that I have gone through, and by showing that it is safe and then actually it is a strength and not a weakness to be vulnerable, then gives the rest of the men in the room the permission to do so as well. So it's just really important that we are role models, right? Both as men and women. And I think this is one of the key guiding principles. This is probably largely to the men in the room. We do have to learn vulnerability. And I want to bring forward this quote by Brené Brown, our favorite Brené Brown. I mean, what would the world be, would be so much emptier without Brené in the world. And she says, vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is our greatest measure of courage. And I just think that is too true. And I think, again, I think this is a part of like what I was talking about earlier, is that we have reinforced and we have rewarded behaviors in the world which are not helpful to health, to well-being, a sense of belonging, whilst we have to change the kind of behaviors that we reward. And vulnerability is certainly one behavior that needs to get to like the top of the reward sort of reward goal, that needs to get straight up there. So vulnerability is super, super important. Okay. So journaling exercise. I always think it's so important to go away, like reflecting, thinking about what we've gone through here. And I'd love if you could share your answers in the chat. I'd probably write it by hand first, or just write it on your computer. And we'll give you a couple of minutes to think about this one, and then please do put it into the chat. So if you identify as a woman, what is one thing you can do to create more space for the men in your life to express themselves better? And if you do identify as a man, what is one thing you can do moving forward to communicate with more clarity about feelings to the people around you? So yeah, if you could put that into the chat, that would be amazing. What are your thoughts on this one, Nicola? What is one thing you can do?
I was actually just putting it in the chat. I think listening, for me, listening to the things that aren't being said. You touched earlier on men communicating even when we feel like they aren't. So things like anger are communication. Silence, I think, is communication. I think that's a really big one. So I think what I would like to do is just create more space to, I guess, question the words that aren't being said.
Yeah.
Or, you know, observing, you seem angry about this, you seem frustrated, you know, is there something else there? Or I noticed you went quiet when I asked you this, or, you know, what are your thoughts there, just so I can better understand
Yeah.
how you're feeling. So I think just being, rather than getting irritated if someone's being angry or silent, just think, well, what are they saying here? And give them permission to express themselves better.
Yeah, yeah. And like it's like you said there, like even, you know, even withdrawing is a form of communicating, right? Withdrawing is a form of, they're trying to say something. There's an expression of discomfort or not knowing how to communicate. And I suppose, like, I think maybe making sure that we don't make any assumptions about what people are feeling or going through. It's like withdrawal, we can make lots of assumptions about what withdrawal means, but actually it might mean something completely different to the person that we are with. Yeah.
So are there any other thoughts from men or women in the room? So women, what can you do to create more space for the men to express themselves better? So give them more time to elaborate, project, issue, solution. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe asking questions. So it could be, if you get a one-word answer or one-line answer, say, great, can you tell me more about that? Or, yeah, is there anything else on that? Just really encouraging them to elaborate. As a woman, clearer communication, say what you mean or what your intention is. Absolutely. I mean, how many times have you heard men say, well, if you don't tell me, how am I supposed to know? And I think that, yeah, there's a lot that we can do in terms of really meaning what we say, not saying it's fine if it's not, also a very British thing. Being really clear on your intentions. I think the world would be a much better place if we all said what we really feel, right? Joey, taking more time to reflect. Absolutely. Just really thinking about what we want to express and how we do it. As a man, to create the time to be able to talk about your feelings and not brushing off how you feel. That's a really big one, isn't it? For just brushing things off. It's fine, don't worry about it. Yeah, don't need to go on about it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ariba, for sharing. This is really interesting. And I mean, it's an interesting thing because sometimes it's like you don't feel like you have time to feel, because feeling takes time, right? And if you're like, quote unquote, always busy, you're actually not giving yourself the time to feel. But actually, by not giving yourself the time to feel, that makes it worse. On the flip side, it's also important not to be wallowing in your feelings for like days on end, right? But it's really about finding that balance between addressing what you're feeling, really moving through it, and then you can sort of move through your life in a much healthier way. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. We do have one more question, which I'd love to get some of your thoughts on. And the open question is, what would make, I think some of you have already been alluding to that, and what would make men feel more comfortable with being vulnerable? And I was thinking about this question specifically in relation to work. And was talking to Nicola about this as we were preparing for this talk, and I was telling her a story about, I was in this workplace a couple of days ago, and I was there for their like Monday morning meeting, and the person who was running the meeting just went straight into, like, there wasn't any, like, it was no opening sort of scene setting. There was no like coming together. It was just like, this is really bad and this needs to change right now. That was like the opening statement. And for someone who's been working a long time around how to hold meetings well, how to create like a sense of well-being in a sort of culture, my jaw just went like slack-jawed, because that clearly doesn't create a sense of well-being within the workplace. So I think that, like, what would make men feel more comfortable being vulnerable? I think as we run our meetings, a really nice way to do it, for example, could be, so like, let's say you have an opening rounds question at a Monday morning meeting, which could be, on a scale from 0 to 10, how are you feeling today? Or like, where is your well-being at? Like 0 to 10, and then perhaps what could help to make you feel better? You know, that could be such an easy way to start that conversation around what would make men feel more comfortable being vulnerable at work. And obviously, like, for example, let's say I was running that meeting, I would be vulnerable and open about that to help other men and also women, because I think there's something there probably, feeling more comfortable at work and being vulnerable and open. What are your thoughts, Nicola?
Yeah, I think it's all about creating the space there. I'm really
Yeah,
conscious of time, so I'm
me
keen to
too.
know
So I think we need to move on to the next question.
what.
Or we need to move to
Yeah,
the
so
next.
what? Yeah, and please do post in the chat here. What do you personally think? Anyone in the room would make more people feel, would make men feel more comfortable being vulnerable in the workplace?
Yeah, and just keep on writing that. We will begin moving through the last few slides because I'm also becoming conscious of time. So I was just going to say a few final words, which is that, you know, this is really hard work, and it will require lots of patience, kindness, and care. You know, none of this will change overnight because this progress will be non-linear, but it's super important because otherwise we will keep on losing young men at a very young age, and also it will have a detrimental impact at work, at a relationship in general. And it's really important to take all of this work on board. And Nicola, I think I'm going to skip the closing rounds question and allow you to talk about this one.
Thank you. So yeah, just please do continue to post in the chat about what you think would make men feel more comfortable being vulnerable at work. I think, Tor, you raised that really good point about not opening a meeting with what is going wrong. Definitely not the way to encourage vulnerability. And if anyone's struggling, I mean, I've definitely been in that in a commercial environment where that's been the case. A Monday morning talking about the commercials, what's going wrong. Give people the space to express what's going on. I really like doing a check-in at the beginning of meetings to ask people how they're feeling, or saying, you know, we're just going to do a temperature check. Is there anything anyone wants to share this morning before we kick off the meeting? How are you all feeling? Is there anything going on? But yeah, please do post any other ideas that you have in the chat. So Tor runs our men's circles at MindVibes, and these are the kind of topics that we explore in a lot more detail. We go really deep, offering that safe and non-judgmental space for people to talk and to find a way forward together. So please do let us know if you'd like to talk about that further.
Yeah, and it's perhaps something which is unusual to do in a workplace, but really does create that sense of well-being and belonging to the other men, and it really begins to create that sense of conscious leadership that that Nicola was talking about earlier, which is obviously what we are aspiring for within all of the workplaces. So just as a closing rounds question, what is your key takeaway from today's talk on men's well-being? Again, it'd be great if you put that into the chats. And yes, if you're interested in us hosting a men's circle at your workplace, get in touch with Nicola. And if you want to put that question in the chat, Nicola, that'd be great. And then I'll just put your details on the screen.
So what's your key takeaway, everyone, from today? What could you do differently as a result of being involved in this conversation to support your colleagues?
I will stop sharing my screen. I think. Listen more.
Listen more. Always.
Yeah, listen more.
Anyone else? Anything that you could do differently to support the men in your life, or as a man?
Or
What
as a man,
can you do
yeah.
better? What can you do differently?
It is always interesting to see what people come through with. So talk more authentically rather than making light of things. Keep calm, ask more questions. Yeah.
And Peter, I really liked your comment earlier about, as a man, just taking time to go out for a walk and think about what you really want to say so you better express yourself in the moment. Andrew, ask more questions. Yeah. The more questions we ask,
The better.
I think.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to today's men's well-being webinar. It's such a pleasure to work in this space and working with Nicola and all of our clients. It's such a privilege to be holding this healing space. Any final words from you, Nicola?
No, just to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join us on a really important topic. I hope you found it useful, and that there's a couple of takeaways. And yeah, please do stay in touch and connect with us if you'd like to talk more about our men's circle. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and thank you very much. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. You're very welcome, everyone.
Did you want to stop?